All right, everybody. This is Emar Substitute. Welcome to another edition of the Sports Inquirer Show. We're broadcasting on April 30th, 2021. Hope all is well for you out in the world today. Thank you for listening or watching us. We're trying something different with recording the Sports Inquirer Show on a video as well as audio. So if you're watching us or listening to us, we thank you for your time. As always, on today's show, it's all on one topic and one topic only. We're going to recap the first round of the NFL draft in our Gridiron Blitz. So we're going to go over pretty much all of the first round picks that took place last night in the NFL draft and give some analysis and opinions of them. And I think through that, and we'll touch on Aaron Rodgers as well because he is part of the discussion. We'll go through everything that happened last night. I think that'll give a good overview of my opinions and thoughts on everything that is going on. But as always, if you want to follow everything that we're doing, you can start with the mothership, the sportsinquirer.net. You'll get our archived Sports Inquirer shows from the past and also verbal submission, which, Lord willing, we will record maybe tonight or tomorrow or over the weekend. We will do that. We're actually behind on it because there was a UFC event that took place last weekend. I have to give my thoughts on that. A little more deeper analysis. If you listen to our previous Sports Inquirer show or two episodes ago, I think if this is on 151, I give a good breakdown of what took place at the last UFC event. But I wanted to go into a little bit more detail. So the Sports Inquirer show did well, but the verbal submission will be a much better job of breaking down the ins and outs of it, as well as reviewing AEW and WWE and some boxing news and all of that stuff. So that should be up on the site hopefully within the next day or two after you're listening or watching us. You can also go to our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Sports Inquirer. That's all one word. The good part about those social media platforms is that whenever we make a post or an announcement or post an interview or record an interview, things along those lines, you'll get an immediate update of what we are doing. I do it for a lot of platforms myself because I could find it difficult at times to go to different sites every day or every hour to see the latest of what's going on. I like getting an automatic update, whether it's an email or a ping or on my phone, things like that. Whenever something is up, we have the same system, so make sure you do that. You can also go to our audio and video content providers, including YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcast, and iTunes. Those are places you can go listen or watch our show. So make sure that you give those platforms an opportunity and check them out. As I mentioned, we're going to get right to the Gridiron Blitz and review the NFL draft. Before we get to the draft itself, we have to mention Aaron Rodgers, the Green Bay quarterback, who has been disgruntled with the front office for the past few years, particularly last year when they drafted Jordan Love in the first round, the quarterback out of Utah State. So pretty much while Aaron Rodgers is in the prime of his career, they drafted his incumbent. He responded with an MVP regular season campaign. Now there's been news that he has been, or his representatives have been meeting with the Green Bay front office, and there has been some disjointment or disagreements with what's been wanted. The Packers want to restructure his deal, which has at least 1 year left or 2 years left. The the Aaron Rodgers representatives or Aaron Rodgers himself wants an extension to go beyond maybe an extension into his 40s. But it's a brilliant move by Aaron Rodgers on the day of the NFL draft where all eyes are focused on the NFL. He makes that announcement that he wants to move on. And he's been sitting on this for a while. So now, he goes to Adam Schefter, Jay Glazer, all of the premier NFL media members, ESPN and Fox, respectively, probably the two biggest media carriers of the NFL, to make this proclamation that he does not want to play for the Packers again, and he wants to move on. Right in the middle, right before the draft. In fact, the draft started 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're at where we are at, based in Atlanta. The news came out. I think I was running errands and doing some other things around 4 or 5 o'clock. This news comes out. Actually, it was earlier than that. I was coming back from the gym around 3 o'clock, and sure enough, you get the news. Aaron Rodgers wants out of Green Bay, and it's just I think that he and obviously Green Bay. their general manager and their front office after the draft said he's not going. We're not trading him. He's not going anywhere. He's a valuable asset to us. All of those things, which they have to say. But I think that the actions that they've done, whether it's been drafting Jordan Love, not approaching the draft with selecting offensive players, and I think the past 10 first rounds, they've only drafted one offensive player, and that player happens to be Jordan Love, the man that is looking to replace Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. So I think this was a calculated move, a smart move. You knew the trade was not going to happen for salary cap purposes. If it's going to take place, it's not going to happen until after June 1st. I'm not going to all the numbers and the semantics of it, but he was not going to be traded on draft day, and for several reasons. One, it's the finances of it, as I mentioned, June 1st. And two, that type of deal takes a lot of approval from a lot of entities. Because if he is traded, whether it's to Denver or Las Vegas or these different locations that we're hearing that may be front runners. San Francisco was a front runner, but that's changed, and we'll get to that when we review the draft. If you're going to make those deals, draft picks would have been helpful in that regard. You're assuming a first rounder probably would have been involved in that. But you also have to work on an extension as far as the contract goes, because he's not going to go to, I keep wanting to say Oakland with the Raiders, but he's not going to go to Las Vegas or Denver, or I'm trying to think of where else I've heard, maybe Tennessee, just throwing some teams out there. He's not going to go to those entities without an extension. And that's going to take a lot of time to figure out. So between now and that June 1st timeline or that date, those things can be worked out. But Rodgers really doesn't have much leverage. He can express his disapproval. We know he's been doing Jeopardy as the guest host, trying to throw that as leverage, like, hey, I could become the full-time host of Jeopardy and try to balance that with the Packers and things like that. That all is fine and dandy, but the reality is that he's under contract for at least the next 2 years. Now, compensation wise, it's not very good, which is why with the extension, you can get more money. They can work around the cap situation because the Packers are not in the best spot. But I just think that he's made his feelings felt and he's expressed them. But ultimately, he's not going to go anywhere. I say there's a 95% chance that he's a Packer this upcoming season. Will he hold out? You rarely see quarterbacks hold out. You'll see other position players do that. He won't be at mini camps and he won't be at the these OTAs and things like that. Half these teams aren't even having them right now anyway because of the pandemic and wanting to maybe have players stay apart from each other until everyone is vaccinated or whatever form of protection you have is better executed, and rightfully so. But when training camp starts in August, I expect him to be in the Packers training camp and participating. But it's the NFL, and everyone is expendable. Everyone can be traded, and we've seen every major quarterback all time outside of maybe damn Tish, I think all time, and in the past 20, 30 years with free agency and really being a presence felt. Outside of maybe a Dan Marino, Jim Kelly, John Elway, you don't see too many guys start and these are all timers. Eli Manning, he's not an all timer, but you get what I'm saying. But those guys stay with their franchises starting from beginning to end. Joe Montana was a Chief. Tom Brady now is a Tampa Bay Buck. Philip Rivers was an Indianapolis Colt. You know, even Drew Brees. Now he's known as a Saint for eternity, but he started off as a Charger when they were in San Diego. So it would not be shocking to see Aaron Rodgers in another uniform at this. I just think at this time, you look at the numbers and the finances, it'll be very difficult. This time next year, I think it's a different story. I think that the money is a little bit easier to work with for the Packers, and you can see some changes going on there. So I think that it's a very interesting situation with Denver, with the Packers and everything going on with Aaron Rodgers. But we'll keep a track of it and seeing everything that's going on. All right, let's get to the draft itself and what we're really here to talk about. Presentation, it was good. I remember when maybe because I'm a New Yorker and I'm biased towards that. And I remember the draft being at Radio City or at uh, in other locations in New York. I always liked having the draft there because there's this, a media center, and it's a it's New York. I love my city. I'm in Atlanta now, but I'm from New Yorker. And I was skeptical of when they were going on the road for these drafts, when it was to Philadelphia or Dallas or Nashville. And I was like, but how's that going to work? Well, the NFL has done a very good job. It's become a spectacle. It's become a destination spot, especially when it was in Philadelphia and in Nashville when they were in downtown Nashville. I went to Vanderbilt and Belmont. I lived in Nashville 7 years, so I know the exact landscape of where they were at. Brilliant job of having the entire setup going on with the draft, including the fans and the spectators and all that other stuff. Cleveland this year, it was solid. Now, it wasn't the exact full blown spectacle that they typically like to have as far as the draft goes for obvious reasons. As I mentioned with COVID and everything going on with that, you can't have 100,000 people in one location, but they still had a good amount of folks at the event. And you notice that at the very beginning, they mentioned everyone or every spectator, as far as the fans, fully vaccinated, and all the people in attendance have been tested for COVID. And it actually affected one prospect that was supposed to be at the draft, but he tested positive. He wasn't able to attend. We'll get to him a little bit later. But I think it looked very good. Goodell, man, I understand what they're trying to do with incorporating fans and recognizing first responders. And they were promoting their draftathon, which was their Zoom call with a lot of celebrities and NFL athletes and things like that. But man, you when you're watching it, you just want them to get to the draft itself or announce the pick. But Goodell goes up there for about 30 seconds to a minute about all the things that they're talking, yada yada. And yeah, I like that the fans, some of the fans were able to announce the picks. That was a nice little touch, having a fan from each of the first round picks on the little chair so that they can wait to be, make the selection. But I thought it ran a little bit long. And I'll admit, after Mac Jones was selected by New England, I turned the draft off and went to bed. It was around 11 o'clock by then. I was tired. I'm an old man. I turned 40 this month, but I'm tired and I wanted to go to bed, and just it dragged on quite a bit, kind of like how I'm talking right now, dragging on before I talk about Trevor Lawrence. But I have to lay the groundwork for what I thought. But I thought the organization was very good. We'll see what they do over the next 2 days, and having it's become a show. I call it the Oscars of sports because, and we just had the Oscars this past weekend. It's very similar. And when you hear the movie buffs and people talk about the Oscars from who won, the who lost, the fashion, what they were wearing, it's very similar to the draft. Who was drafted where? Who was he selected too high? Who fell in the draft? Even some of the wardrobes. You'd be making fun of Mac Jones, how he was walking when he was going to the stage. It really is the Oscars of sports, and it becomes a very big night. And now it's spread over 3 days. Now, as far as the draft itself, we'll start with Trevor Lawrence. We knew he'd be the number one pick overall by the Jaguars. Not much of a surprise there. I think that he grades out as probably one of the top five quarterbacks in the modern era, and I'll say maybe from coming into the draft since the early '80s. Obviously, the gold standard was Elway, and then right there is probably Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning. All those guys graded out at a very, very high level. Trevor Lawrence is right there. He's going to do well in Jacksonville. He's a face of the franchise. He'll fit that market well. I think that the whole scrutiny of him, and I was talking about earlier in the show, or in our earlier broadcast, about his Sports Illustrated article explaining that they're questioning his passion for the game or his motivation. And I said earlier, and I'll say it again, I'm tired of this narrative. We're hearing it already from some of these draft picks. I'm disrespected. I have a chip on my shoulder. Everyone hates me. If that's your motivation to get to your peak level, that's fine. But not every athlete's like that. Not every person is like that. I've met a lot of successful people, and I think I've had levels of success myself. And you have, if you're listening or watching us right now. Motivation by hate and anger most of the time only takes you so far. Your motivation and desires to be the best at your craft, whether it's professional or personal, or being a good family person, or good as a work and you're working in your career or whatever endeavor that you have, is usually the desire to be the best at it at a high level, and that's usually what you want to do. I don't really see too many motivated by hate and anger, and that's but it's easy media narrative that they like to put out there. And Lawrence is going about it with a different approach. But I said he's going to be a really good quarterback in a very high position. Zach Wilson, we knew that he'd be picked second by the Jets. I personally think that he's a good prospect, can make all the throws. A little brittle. He's had several injuries at the collegiate level that required surgery. But I think he's going to be a solid quarterback physically. He's all there. The Jets have a lot of work to do, though, to support him. And that's what a lot of these franchises, for all these players, but especially at the quarterback position, Jacksonville's in the same boat with Trevor Lawrence. As much of a high prospect as he is, the support system is not there yet for those guys. So I think you're going to see struggles from them. But I think Lawrence and Wilson, if they can physically stay upright and get some good coaching and put in a good system with good players around them, I think they can be solid players and do very well for those franchises. I think Trey Lance, the San Francisco 49ers, is maybe in the best position long run to be successful because you have an offensive minded coach in Kyle Shanahan, very committed to a system that we've seen have success at different places, from an assistant at Washington and with the Falcons when Matt Ryan was the MVP and went and made a Super Bowl appearance, to being with the 49ers and making a Super Bowl appearance as a head coach with them a few years ago. I think Jimmy Garoppolo, solid quarterback, but it wasn't someone that he necessarily trained and groomed from the very beginning. I think you're going to see him with Trey Lance. Lance is probably the physically most intriguing prospect that we've seen in years because the physicality is there, but we have not seen as much production at a high level. Obviously, at North Dakota State, at the FCS level, excuse me, we have not seen that him play elite competition. But when he has played, he has looked special and spectacular. And plus, I think he got messed up with the way the season worked out in college football, where at the FBS level, all these teams end up playing in the fall. FCS, they did not play in the fall. So we weren't able to see Trey Lance play an entire season this year and unable to see him perform. I think if he performed at with North Dakota State in the fall, like we are able to see Lawrence and Justin Fields and Zach Wilson, even Trevor Lawrence, and seen them and see him play, that's where I think we would have had a better look at Trey Lance. But obviously, pick number three, he's not hurt in that way. I think Garoppolo stays another year with the 49ers, and then they move on from him. I think they wanted to move him on right now, and he still might be traded. But I think it'll be smart for them. We saw the negotiations with the Patriots possibly bring him there or reunited with Belichick. But I think it's smart to keep him around on the roster. He plays a year. If he plays very well, he'll have a good market to be traded, or if he's released, he can sign somewhere else. And then Trey Lance is the man for them to go with in the future. So I like that pick. Uh, I knew that if you trade all the way up to number three, you're not going to go for Mac Jones, who's a solid quarterback. I think he'll do very well with New England. He's pretty much like a Tom Brady Jr. He's reliable. He processes systems well. Arm strength is okay, but he's very adaptable to running a system. That's why I've always felt when they signed Cam Newton that that's like complete antithesis of what the Patriots have worked with under head coach Bill Belichick and offensive coordinator the Josh McDaniels. They like to have a guy who like very pretty much like Tom Brady, and no one's not Tom Brady's maybe the greatest of all time, probably is as far as quarterbacks go. But you have a guy that can process systems well, make quick throws, very accurate, and that's where Newton he struggles with accuracy. Mac Jones is gonna get the ball, put it where it needs to be. Obviously, playing at Alabama, he played with He may have all play with all first rounders, receivers, a first round running back, multiple first round offensive linemen, or guys that'll be selected in the top 2, 3 rounds. I mean, that the collection of offensive talent is probably the best of all time at Alabama over the past 2 years that Mac Jones has been able to play with. And when you look at the guys, and we'll talk about some of his teammates at Alabama being drafted, incredible stuff. But I think that if you make that move though to number 3, like San Francisco did, you don't make that move for Mac Jones. You make that move for someone with a lot of upgrade, or with a lot of upside potential, and that's why you take a Trey Lance. Kyle Pitts selected by the Falcons at number 4. Man, we're based in Atlanta. We have a lot of Atlanta friends and supporters of that team. When Trey Lance was picked, I would have been very intrigued if Mac Jones, in fact, was selected number 3 overall. If they had to choose between Lance, Pitts, and ultimate and Justin Fields, I think if Lance was there, they may have taken them, but Lance was unavailable, and I said it's either Pitts or Fields. I would have leaned towards Fields. I think that Matt Ryan's not availability, because he's been pretty durable, but his skill level, especially from the outside media, has been overvalued. And I say that because you've seen regression in his play over the past 2 years. He suits up and plays the contest. I'll give him that. But he's never had the strongest arm. That's regressed. His mobility has never been elite. Now it's average. Now, the coaching has not been very good in Atlanta. The coordinators have been very bad. Dan Quinn, by his end tenure with the Falcons, was not a very good head coach. So you have a new offensive system with Arthur Smith, the new head coach, previous offensive coordinator with the Titans. So you're going to have maybe a different offensive mind, and you want to give Matt Ryan a chance maybe to be part of that system. That's fair. But I think, and I've heard this from people, he has a good 4 or 5 years left in his career as far as playing at a above average level. I do not see that. I think you're looking at Tom Brady. Everyone looks at Tom Brady. He's an exception since he stepped into the league. You're never going to have a 6 round pick in the NFL draft become the greatest all time in his position. That's not going to happen. You're not going to have that quarterback win 7 Super Bowls, or 6 Super Bowls, all the Super Bowls that Tom Brady has won. You're not going to have that happen ever again. And you can't look at Brady as a rule. We saw Philip Rivers regress, Drew Brees once he got into their late 30s, early 40s. It happens. It's going to happen to Matt Ryan. So if you're the Falcons, you have to look at it when this happens to him, and he's under contract. He's going to be with the Falcons the next 2 years. Are we going to see the same from him, or is he going to regress at an incredibly low level, so that when we do move on from him, whether he retires or he moves on to another team, do we have an incumbent that's ready? The thing is to have a quarterback sitting there for 2 years. If you have Ryan out there and he plays all the games, that's very tough to just have a quarterback sitting there in that spot. So that's where you run into some issues there. And then plus, Kyle Pitts is a special talent. He may be the best overall player in this draft if you did like a best player. Now, Trevor Lawrence is more valuable because he's a quarterback. But if you look at the best players in the draft, Kyle Pitts is right there. And for the Falcons to take him, I'm not necessarily mad at that either. I think what you're saying, and the draft has 2 more days to it as we're recording this. We're going to make the offense as good as it can be. And I think Julio Jones, he's not going to go anywhere right now. That contract is not very trade friendly. So you figure you're going to have Ridley, Julio Jones as your wide receivers. You have first rounders on the offensive line. Hopefully they play up to that level. You have a Hurst already at tight end. You can run a lot of 2 tight end sets with Pitts, and we're going to try to score 30 points a game and offense our way into some postseason activity. Defensively, we're going to give up a lot of points, but if we score 30 or average around 25 to 30 points a game, we'll win more games than we lose. And hopefully, with a new defensive system, a new coach, can coach them up. Maybe they can contend for a wild card spot at this time. That's what you're looking at right now. If you drafted a quarterback, particularly Fields, you say the rebuild is on right now. Ryan and Julio may have one more year with us, but after that, they're both gone, and we're going to be in complete rebuild mode. Some people don't want to go that route. I would have gone that route personally because I think your peak with Matt Ryan is probably a playoff appearance, and that's it. Your goal is to win a championship, and this is not a championship roster at all, especially on the defensive end. So I would have gone with the quarterback, but and if there was a stud defensive player, I would have gone with him too, worthy of a top five pick. There wasn't one this year. So that's why I think Pitts is an okay choice. The Bengals took Jamar Chase, wide receiver out of LSU, with the fifth pick. They're going to reunite him with Joe Burrow. I personally would have gone with Sewell because you have to protect Joe Burrow. He was sacked through his first handful of games, I think more than any other quarterback in history for their first few games appearing. And obviously, he tore his ACL on a hit in the pocket. You got to protect him. But Jamar Chase is probably physically the best wide receiver in the NFL draft out for this year. So you take him, and I guess you roll with it. Jalen Waddle with Alabama. You want to give he's a wide receiver from Alabama. You want to give Tua some offensive weapons. You reunite him with Waddle. Not mad at that necessarily. Detroit taking Sewell, offensive tackle from Oregon. Very good move. I like that pick. Now they could have gone with some defensive backs or even a Devonta Smith, the Alabama wide receiver. They weren't going to go quarterback, obviously, with the acquisition of Jared Goff. But I think to protect your quarterback is crucial, and to get your run game going makes things very easy, and it fits the Dan Campbell mindset of building with from within and then out. So I like that pick of Sewell. Carolina going with J.C. Horn and the cornerback from South Carolina. Enjoy the Sam Darnold era because Justin Fields was sitting right there for Carolina to take, but they're going to ride with a with Sam Darnold. Donald had a very up and down career, mostly down with the Jets his first few years in the league. Maybe Matt Rule feels that in his system with a new approach to things, he can do better. So we'll see what happens there with Carolina. But I like J.C. Horn, and I like Patrick Surtain with the Broncos. Similar with the Broncos, Teddy Bridgewater is your guy for right now. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe they're have outside shot hopes of getting Aaron Rodgers and then take a quarterback and then take Fields in that spot. But yeah, very interesting to see what happens there. Devonta Smith, wide receiver, Philadelphia Eagles. I like that pick as well. I like a lot. The first half was not bad at all with the first half of the picks. You want to give Jalen Hurts a chance. You picked the Heisman Trophy winner. And the thing about Devonta Smith, yes, he's slight in frame, but I see Marvin Harrison with him so much, the Hall of Fame wide receiver. If he reaches half of that, obviously that'd be very good. If he has a Hall of Fame career or even close to it. But just the size, the route running, the ability to line up in different spots, whether it's a slot or on the outside, even some jet sweeps, he is going to be a guy who get the ball in his hands 10 to 15 times a contest in various capacities. And that's very, very good weapon for Jalen Hurts to have. And Justin Fields, the Bears very smart trading up to the number 11 spot to get him. The litany of bad quarterback play with the Bears is infamous. Outside of Sid Luckman in the 50s, and yes, I know Jim McMahon won the Super Bowl in '85 with the Bears as at quarterback, with probably the best defense, or one of the three best defenses for at least a 1 year span in NFL history. But outside of that, we've seen Mike Tomczak, Eric Kramer, Jay Cutler, recently, and to give Cutler credit, they did make it to an NFC Championship game. Rex Grossman, who made a Super Bowl appearance with the Bears way back, and well, not back in the day, in the 2000s, but still, just most recently, Mitch Trubisky, a winning quarterback for the Bears if you look at the win-loss record, but just to not elevate them to high heights. And you look at Pat Mahomes, what he's done with the Chiefs, Deshaun Watson, wins and losses, maybe not the best, but he's won a playoff game with the Texans and has played at an MVP level. Trubisky, while a solid quarterback, has not been as good as a Watson or Mahomes, and that was always going to be hanging over the Bears. You get a Justin Fields, who I thought was the second best quarterback prospect in this draft behind Trevor Lawrence. You get him at 11. Yes, you gave up a few first rounders in the future, but if Justin Fields works out the way he should, and I expect to see him on the field midway through the season, Andy Dalton can start the season at quarterback, and I'm not mad at that. He's a solid pro, but I think Fields by midseason, because the Bears will not be very good. Now, defensively, they might be in some contests, but their win loss won't be very high. You put Fields in, and I think he can be a very, very viable and good quarterback for for them. So they need to look out for that. We'll just blow through the rest of because we're rounding out the top 10. We finished it up. Yeah, Micah Parsons with the Bears. I mean, with the Cowboys. He was a pick after the Bears. I know Dallas wanted those defensive backs, whether it was Surtain or Horn, but I think Micah Parsons, defensive playmaker, gives you gives you a chance to uh, rush the quarterback. And their linebacker play has been struggling most recently with just either between unavailability of certain players, or we saw Sean Lee retire. We saw we've seen regression from Jalen Smith at times, and from other players in those positions. That's where you find a way to improve your defense, and that was a solid deal, for them. Slater, the offensive tackle for Northwestern, going to the Chargers. Similar deal. You got to protect your quarterback, and he's a top 10 prospect. Fell down to 13. Good move there. The Jets picking up Tucker, the offensive lineman from USC. Once again, if you're going to pick a Zach Wilson, you got to keep him upright. So picking an offensive guard there is very good. And then Mac Jones going to the Patriots with the 15th overall pick. Typical Patriots. I put on Twitter that him going to New England is very Patriots way, and that's the way it works. And I went over Mac Jones earlier about what he brings to that system and what he can contribute. So I like those picks overall. I have really no issues with any of those picks. Now half of them aren't going to pan out, and half of them are going to struggle because that's just. I'll put it this way: 50% of these first round picks are not going to be successful as far as Pro Bowl level and being franchise changers. That's just the way it works. So when you're picking, especially when you get down to the teens and into the 20s, it's just very tough to see what's going on. Just going down the rest of the field. Tony, 20th pick for the Giants. Obviously, they want to give offensive weaponry for Daniel Jones. That's not bad at all. So we'll see what he does there. Caleb Fairley was unable to be at the draft. The cornerback from Virginia Tech. The Titans took him 22nd overall. He was the one that tested positive for COVID and was unable to attend the draft as far as in person. But he'll be okay as far as that goes. And then I guess the another big thing, yeah, we'll get to this. Is going to wrap up the first round. The Travis Etienne and the Najee Harris debate at 24 for the Pittsburgh Steelers at running back. They took Najee Harris. I like that pick over Travis Etienne. We love Travis Etienne, awesome name, but you got to look at it objectively. I think Harris is bigger, stronger. He can catch the ball out of backfield. He'll be able to get those third and short scenarios a little bit better than Travis Etienne will. And I think the systems fit better. I think with Pittsburgh, and my uncle's a Pittsburgh fan. I was talking with him about this. We are never going to go back to the steel curtain era of defense and having that way of winning games. But all good Pittsburgh teams, from Franco Harris to even down to the '90s when they're in the Super Bowl with, and with Jerome Bettis and just those type of players, and then even most recently in the Mike Tomlin era, they've always had good running backs from Willie Parker to Le'Veon Bell. I said Bettis a little bit as well. All those guys, all those teams had a good running attack. We've seen in the change with Roethlisberger in the second half of his tenure with the Steelers and Antonio Brown, who's a Hall of Fame talent at receiver. We get all of that. But them throwing the ball 35 to 40 times a game and being so reliant on the pass. And Roethlisberger just is not physically able to keep up with that anymore. And that they just have to change their style of play. As I said, defensively, they have some players that can be, very special. Under they have Watt, they have Bush. So I mean, they have some elite talent on that side of the ball. But if they want to be successful, and they can still be a playoff team, they have to run the ball more consistently. And I think having Najee Harris there fits that mold better. And I think with Travis, with the Jaguars and the system that they run, and I'm very intrigued by the offensive system that we're going to see from Urban Meyer. In college, we saw him run a very spread approach to a spread approach offense. And we saw him with Tebow, obviously very successful tenure in Florida. With Ohio State, we still saw what he did with some of those guys. Even in Utah, when he had Alex Smith there, and guys with a lot of mobility, a lot of read options, things along those lines. Trevor Lawrence is athletic, and we saw him have some long runs in college, but he is a traditional pocket passer with the athletic ability to move around a bit and avoid sacks. I don't think you're going to be running too many RPOs with Trevor Lawrence. And Meyer, he's a very smart offensive mind. He'll adjust to the NFL game, I think. But what you will see, though, is the usage of a running back to be able to catch the ball and go in different spots. And obviously the synergy of Travis Etienne with playing in college with Trevor Lawrence. They're used to working together, so that's just a natural connection. So I think for both those guys, they ended up in very good spots respectively. Even if you had Travis Etienne listed higher than Najee Harris, I think both those guys are in good positions. I think Rashad Bateman, wide receiver from Minnesota, he's going to be very good for the Ravens. I think with him not playing this past season or not playing too much of it, yeah, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. But he was top 3, 4 receiver in college football during his entire career. And I actually saw Waddle perform well and Devonta Smith and Deshaun Chase. And I think those guys being at Alabama and LSU get a lot more attention. I'm not saying Bateman is as good as those guys, but I think he could be a very solid pro. It can make good tough passes. And remember, he's playing at Minnesota, so the talent around him it was from either person throwing to him or surrounding offensive players not as high as those players at Alabama and LSU. But I think he'll be a very good pick for Baltimore in the late first round. And then Green Bay, they took Eric Stokes, cornerback from Georgia. Stokes, from a very good player, first round worthy talent, physically. I personally may have had him as a second round pick, but once again, they don't even throw Aaron Rodgers a bone as far as picking an offensive player, not even a lineman. That's just, it's Green Bay. I don't know what's going on there, but this will be a very interesting ride to see what takes place as they move on through. And that concludes today's show. Thanks for listening. We're going to do another show tomorrow or the next episode where we'll recap the second and third round of the draft, as well as preview Atlanta United. They have a match coming up tomorrow on May 1st against New England. I didn't touch on that in this show because I wanted to focus exclusively on the NFL. But listen to our next show and we'll have some thoughts on that Atlanta United contest when it takes place. So until next time, good fight, good night, and be safe.